Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking Editor, Tom McKenna. And with me this episode, our Executive Art Director, Mike Pekovich.
Hey, guys.
Special Projects Editor, Matt Kenny.
Hello.
Our Web Producer, Ben Strano. Hey. And Jeff Rose, our Video Manager. This episode, we're going to get right to the exciting questions. And this one, the first one comes from Charlotte. Now, hang with me. This is a fairly long one. I have a question regarding alternating grain direction when veneering a torsion box that will be 2 1/4 inches thick. I'm using 3/8 inch Baltic birch ply for the skins with 3 32nd inch shop sawn veneers on both sides. The veneers will be show faces on both sides of the box, and I want the grain of both show faces running horizontally. This means the grain direction of the plies inside the torsion box will be running the same direction. Is this problematic? Or does the honeycomb counteract any type of wood movement that might occur? Do I need to veneer the inside of the skins? Come on, Matt. Kick out the jams.
Yeah, let me just preface this answer by saying I don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. So what she's asking here is that, normally when you make plywood, each layer of each ply, the grain on each ply runs in the 90-degree direction to the previous ply.
All right.
So she's asking, do I need to continue this on from the plywood that I'm using for the skins of the torsion box
to the inside of
to the shop sawn veneers that she's gluing down? I would say no. I mean, one, you're making a torsion box, which is just the amount of, especially if you're using a honeycomb interior, the amount of glue surface that is going to be there is going to keep that thing flat. As long as you assemble it flat, so to speak. When you make it, it comes out flat. It should stay that way. Mm-hmm. And so you could really put down your shop sawn veneer in whichever direction you want to. One thing I do wonder about, honestly, not knowing how big this torsion box is or what she's using it for, it seems that perhaps 3/8 of an inch thick Baltic birch plywood is a bit thick for the skins. You could probably go with a 1/2 inch, but
No, this is 3/8.
I'm sorry, you could go with a quarter inch. Is what I meant to say, a quarter inch. But she might be limited to this because the thickness of the honeycomb she can get,
sure.
And she needs to get 3/4 for the skins to make it the thickness that she wants. Right. But you could probably go a little bit thinner. But you could, if you wanted to be, I don't know why. And I think that what I would do is I would not worry about it. But if I was worried about it, what I would do is glue down what's called a backer veneer between the plywood skin and the shop sawn veneer. And that, usually it's a low-grade commercial cut veneer, and you run the grain 90 degrees in between those two layers. Okay. And so you're able to continue alternating the grain direction of the plies without having to alter the direction of the one you're really concerned about. The other thing about plywood too is that you can always just cut the plywood so that the grain runs in the different opposite direction. You
can buy like 4x8 sheets with the grain running the short way instead of the long way.
You can, yes, yeah. And I often cut plywood so that the grain runs across a short dimension. Okay. So that when I do veneer, I don't have to go back and have a backer ply or anything like that. Cool. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with what she's doing.
Move on. All right. The next question comes from Ben and not this guy over here. I've been trying to set up my extremely small basement shop to work on projects that require only hand tools. Lately, I've been making picture frames in small boxes, but I haven't found a good solution for cutting rabbets with my current tool set: block, smoothing, jack, and router planes, and some Japanese saws. What's the most efficient / cost-effective method for cutting rabbets and grooves by hand?
Well, the good news is you need at least one more tool.
At least.
For rabbets, I would recommend getting a rabbet plane, like something akin to a Stanley 78 Those are actually pretty inexpensive on the market in terms. You can still find a lot of them in the used section of your eBay counter. Like from $35 or $45, you can get a really good rabbet plane. Make sure it has the little nicker. It looks like sort of a star-shaped thing screwed to the side of it. That scores the grain when you're doing rabbets cross grain, so you don't get any tear out. But those actually work really well for rabbets.
You can also get new versions
Yeah,
of that.
and pay a lot more for them, but they'll be really nice.
Yeah.
Whereas a grooving plane, you can buy old grooving planes.
Like a Stanley 45 or a Stanley 50.
Well,
Stanley 50.
Those are like combination planes. I'm thinking just like the standalone single groove things.
Like a Stanley number 50, I believe is the number, is a dedicated grooving plane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's similar to what Veritas makes now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can get those. Or you could make grooving planes.
Do you know anybody who makes those?
I might know somebody who's made a grooving plane or two in his life.
And they have a website.
And he has a website. Yeah, many years ago, we did an article in Fine Woodworking written by me about how to make a grooving plane. And you can use plane irons that Lee Nielsen makes and sells for molding planes. And you can get, so you could pretty much make them whatever width you wanted to.
And then it's just the cost of the iron. You make the whole tool yourself.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. But, there are, so both with rabbets and with, what was the other thing you wants to cut? Grooves. I mean, rabbets are easier than grooves.
True.
But there are ways to cut them where you would not need, say for a rabbet, you could use what you have now plus a shoulder plane. And the way I've seen that done many different ways, but one way is to rough out the groove, and you can do that by cutting it, both walls, with your back saw, and then cleaning them up with a shoulder plane. Or you could define the vertical wall and then waste away most of it with a chisel, and then come back with a shoulder plane. And a similar way you can do grooves, which I've seen done by the guys at Colonial Williamsburg, is to use a guide block that stretches across the length of the groove to keep your saw vertical and cut down the walls of the groove, go back with a chisel and get rid of most of the waste, and then finish it off with a router plane to get the bottom level and the same depth all the length of the groove.
It's a whole lot of work.
That's a whole
for
lot
a rabbet
of
in a
work.
groove.
It is, yeah. Because the other thing you could do is get a dado set and a table saw.
It's going to be loud. Well, Vic Tesselin did an article on
that's
on
right.
a bunch of hand tool techniques that Ben might find useful.
It was a
in this
handwork
situation.
bin.
It was handwork. Vic Tesselin.
I think one thing that you can do with your existing tools, since probably the best way to do it is if you're cutting dados as opposed to grooves. Dados basically is a groove going across grain, especially if it's not too far, too long, the stock isn't too wide. Then you just basically lay it out. You can saw the walls and chisel it out, then use your little router plane to clean it up. That's actually, I think, probably the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah, you can also just chisel it out as well, which is a little bit faster because you get. Did you say chisel it out?
I said chisel and then clean out the bottom with your router
I
plane.
missed the chisel part.
That's fine.
Yeah, but with all of these things, because a dado, you have to. A dado is a little different. You'd have to, I guess, have what they call a moving philister plane, which with a removable fence, I guess, so that you could go across the grain. But grooves are easier with a grooving plane. Rabbets are easier with a rabbet plane.
And they're all easier with a table saw.
Yeah. So, did we answer his question?
Yeah, well, I think we gave him options.
Yes.
I think we did.
Oh, he wants a good solution. Well, we gave him a good
We gave him
solution.
multiple.
Table
Yes.
saw and a dado set.
Yes, for efficient / cost effective. I think we offered both efficient and cost effective.
And
Yeah.
quiet.
And quiet.
Quiet was critical. So
Yeah.
I think we're rocking and rolling.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on then. It's
yeah.
time for our all-time favorite technique of all time for this week. Do you want to go first, Mike?
Sure. I often use stop blocks in my work. whether it's a crosscut, a sled, or maybe the chop saw, or even at the router table. I often use hold downs, those little Distaco style hold downs. What I've started doing recently, I started using stop blocks equipped with a hold down. Yeah.
Stop.
It's pretty cool. So I actually had a Distaco clamp screwed to a little block of wood. And then, especially if I'm cutting smaller parts at the table saw, I can clamp that wherever I want it to act as a stop block. And then I can also sort of swing down the hold down to hold a little piece in place while I make the cut. I was very proud of myself for figuring this one out. And I've used it probably a couple times in the shop in the last couple weeks or so. And so it's like one of those things where it's like, why have I never done this before? And I don't know the answer to that.
Because Tim Rousseau had never written about it in an article.
No, it was a standard size Distaco, not one of those little mini guys that you sometimes see.
I mean, mini guys would probably work. Just whatever. I got a bunch. I go over to Harbor Freight and pick up a dozen or so. And I used to have just like 3 or 4. And whenever I made a jig, I had to go find the old jig they were attached to, unscrew it, and do it. Now it's like, forget it. I just leave them attached, go buy a bunch of them, and now I got jigs all over the place with hold downs. I still raid them every now and then when I have to, but not quite as often as I used to.
When Mike eventually does pass, heaven forbid, but it happens to us all, his kids are going to go into the shop and they're going to be 3,462 Harbor Freight Distaco style clamps.
Yes.
On some jigs that Mike had not used in 50 years. But he didn't want to take them off because we might go back one day and use that jig. Don't want to take them off.
I want to see the video of Mike going into Harbor Freight. That's all.
Oh, I can totally see Mike in Harbor Freight. Yeah, wearing his fur-lined Crocs. He's got his glasses down on his nose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Fur-lined Crocs.
Harbor Freight is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I've actually never been. There's not one near me.
There's one on the Berlin Turnpike.
That's in Berlin.
That's
not
near
me.
you. It's not? That's close to you. Is it my turn?
Yeah, what the heck?
All right. So last episode, I talked about flush trim bits, and one that I didn't like and ones that I really liked. And that was my favorite tool. And my favorite technique is, related to these flush trim bits and what I was using them for. That. And what I had to do was flush trim a bunch of edge banding, right? And if I don't have much to do, I will do it with a block plane, maybe 2 block planes, one of them set very coarse and then one set very fine.
Right.
And but I had a lot to do. So I recalled something that I've seen in different incarnations in fine woodworking through the years, usually in what we used to call methods of work and now we call something else. Workshop tips, tippity doo-dah.
Someone get him a magazine. Quick.
Well, I don't edit that, so I don't. I almost. But anyways, it's a technique where you can flush trim something by using an offset fence. So what I did was I had my router fence, and I clamped a very thin piece of plywood to it. And
To the in-feed side or out-feed side?
across the in-feed and out-feed side.
Okay.
And then I put my router bit flush with that clamped on piece of plywood, that auxiliary fence.
Okay.
So you have this little overhang on the router table fence now. And the plywood runs along that auxiliary fence. And the edge banding, which is actually wider than the plywood is thick, right? That runs under the overhang.
So what you're adding doesn't go all the way down to the
Correct.
bottom of
It
the
doesn't go
fence.
all the way down. It's just above. It's high enough off the router table
Sure.
to fit the edge banding underneath it.
Oh, cool.
So then you just run your plywood along the auxiliary fence. The edge banding fits underneath it and gets trimmed off, and you end up with a flush trimmed edge banding.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm doing there? Mike?
Yes. And as opposed to just using a flush trim bit with the bearing at the top, you have better bearing surface because you're using the whole vertical portion of the fence.
Yes, you have a better bearing surface, correct. And you can't, because you can't do it against the normal fence because the edge banding is too wide.
No, I'm just talking about a trim bit with a bearing at the top.
Yeah, well, you need something to bear against. You can't just have a router bit. You're not supposed to just have a router bit, sticking up out of the table and then you come and zip your wood along it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you would do?
No, there's a bearing at the top.
Right. No, I wouldn't do that.
Okay, but
You could, in theory, yes.
I mean, that's what you're making. A bit with a reference surface above the cutting surface, parallel or
Yes.
in line with reference surface.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But you're right. My bit does have a bearing on it.
Yeah.
But I'm not using just the bearing to
Right.
bear against. I want something more substantial to bear against.
I usually stack 7 or 8 bearings on top of the bit.
I do know someone who used to, and would belabor that point that if there was a bearing on the bit, that you did not need a starting pin or a fence because the bearing controlled the cut. Yeah. And it's just like, sometimes you can be technically right but wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were getting at, that I didn't need this elaborate thing because I could just go off the bearing.
Go zip, zip.
Well, I was kind of suggesting that.
But the problem is, so you're standing something up on edge.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
That's yes. No, I think I was making that point. You could use a bearing, but you probably wanted a little bit more vertical support to keep from tipping.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm sure that's completely unclear to everyone listening.
We'll show photos, right? Ben?
Ben was scratching his head until we determined that this little sacrificial thing didn't go all the way to the table. It was up a little bit. Then Ben's like, got it. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Whatever.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
2 thumbs up. Sweet. Well, mine, this is going to kill Matt. My all-time favorite technique of all time for this week involves biscuits. Now,
Why would that upset
I'm
me?
just kidding. You've mocked my biscuit work before.
No, it's Ben's wife that makes bad biscuits. That's what I mock.
What?
Oh,
What the what?
Throwing down.
And
The
Matt
mic
is
is
potted
off.
down.
He's out. No, I think it was a method of work tip that I had seen years ago on someone using biscuit joinery, and the nature of biscuits. One of the ways that they get their strength is when moisture hits it from the glue, they expand and lock in place. Unfortunately, by nature, if you kind of leave them out and about or keep the top off your container,
Yes.
they tend to swell. And so some of the slots that I had were pretty tight, and I had read this tip about someone either microwaving the biscuits or pounding them with a hammer.
I've heard microwaving. I've also heard clamping them in a vise.
Oh.
Yeah, clamp them in a vise.
Well, I
Yeah.
took a different tact. I sanded my biscuits.
Oh.
I had my I didn't pound them. I sanded them. So I had my sharpening station set up. I have a granite block, and I had a really coarse grit paper glued down to it. So anytime I got a little bit of stickiness, I just walked over and scraped it, and then stuck it in the slot, and it worked out well. It was cool. Better than microwaving, walking up and down the stairs. But
We could
That's
microwave a bunch of them at once.
I could, but then I'd go into my basement and they'd just swell right back up.
You got the little jar. Keep them in the jar with the lid on.
I even keep a desiccant in my jar.
Wow.
And they still, most of them are fine, but it's occasional when I leave them out. And I also had problems, which kind of relates to a previous smooth move where I had to disassemble the cabinet after assembling it.
Yes.
And so I had some glue residue in the slots. So I think that was probably
Right.
more of the
Right.
issue than the actual slot cutting. But
So
it was cool.
your technique is
Sand a biscuit, baby.
a common cure for swollen biscuits.
Yes.
Nice.
It's all out there.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, let's move on to some more questions. Let me see. This one comes from Mark. And Mark says, I'm making a dresser that will require multiple vertical drawer dividers. I like the look of the dovetail dividers and the case Mike made in issue 170. and this is going to Mike. How did you do the layout above and below to ensure that they were parallel to the case sides?
Well, they should be parallel. I think it's pretty straightforward. I typically wait for the joinery to be done on the horizontal stretchers first, and then you can do one of two things. You can just gang the two up so that their shoulders are lined up end to end, and just take a square and scribe a line across both at one time, and that'll guarantee your vertical dividers in the same place. The other thing you can do is do the joinery dry fit the entire case and then use a square to sort of bridge the gap between the two. That one ensures that they're really lined up end to end in like the physical space they're going to live. The downside is if there's any bowing to the dividers and you register your combo square against it, it may not give you a perfectly parallel line with the case sides. The other way, you sandwich them together and mark them. You get a perfectly straight line from each one, but maybe it's slightly off in terms of their final positioning. Either way, both of those things are thinking way too much about it. Just do either one, and it's going to be close enough for you because, you'll get within really, really close of vertical anyway. And then if it's not, then you just sort of trim your drawer front to match the angle anyway.
How are you cutting those little dealy bobs?
The dovetails?
Yeah, how are you going to cut them? I mean, first you got to dado them, right? Cut a little dado groove in there. Or what do you do?
No, I usually just do just sort of a stopped dovetail slot. I don't bother doing a little short dado first because they're typically pretty shallow. Mm-hmm. And actually, I probably gang up both parts, the top and the bottom dovetail part, gang them up with their back edges together. So the front edges are front and back. Clamp on a little T-square. You kind of zip in from one side, zip in from the other side.
Yeah, so that's what I was wondering is why even lay them out at all and worry about it? Mark where you want it to start or whatever. You have your little T-square.
Yeah.
You clamp them together and you just zip around them both at the same time. And as long as you align them right when you clamp them together, they're going to be square because,
Yeah. That too.
All right.
That'd be good.
What I'm saying, Mike, no.
All right.
I thought you were eventually going to get to that. You're going to say you could do either one of these things, but that's a lot of work, so don't do them. Do this other thing.
Okay, here's the other way. This is where you can't do that. If you're not using like a router bit with a dovetail router bit to route both portions, I'll make the divider first, cut the dovetails top and bottom, fit that in place, and then chop off the back half of the dovetail. And then dry fit the case, fit the divider in, check it for square, and then scribe from there. Mm-hmm. That'll get you there too. Lots of ways to go about doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of ways to skin the cat. So the next question comes from Corey, and Corey says, I'm making a podium out of Honduran mahogany for a church, and this is really one of the first times I've done anything in mahogany. The wood I have is a good mix of fairly dark and then really light boards. I didn't realize there was this much color variance in the species, and so I'm trying to figure out how to make this all look good together. The client is looking for a consistent dark tone. Any advice on balancing the color? Any comments on the podium first?
No. So one thing I would point out about mahogany nowadays is that a lot of stuff gets called mahogany. And depending on where you buy it, it may not be mahogany at all. Like in the flooring industry, if you go somewhere that makes a lot of flooring and you're buying hardwood from them, they call just about anything they want to mahogany. And it's not really mahogany. So that could explain the variation in the colors, that you're really not actually using the same wood. It's two different species or something. And that's why the colors are different. Mm-hmm. I guess if you don't have time to test them to see what happens when they oxidize, then you're going to have to in some way stain them, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. If you have, number one, even if they're slightly mismatched and you go to dye them, unless the dye or stain is so opaque, they're still probably not going to look exactly the same.
Correct.
So then you either get into an issue of kind of doing selective staining to match certain boards, and then it's a big hassle. Peter Gedries wrote a good article on that in the past, but what I would try to do, let's say I'm going to try to dye and stain this piece eventually to sort of get the wood pretty dark to the same roughly homogeneous. I would still try to be thoughtful about how I'm arranging these light and dark boards. So let's say the panels are light, or the panels are fairly dark, but the frames are fairly light. As long as all the light components are made from the same color wood, then you go to stain it, and even if there's a slight contrast, it's going to look purposeful.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then in terms of dyeing and staining, mahogany is actually... there's not a real pronounced grain, but the pores are pretty big. So for a wood like that, when I've done period pieces in mahogany, I'll start with sort of a brighter redder dye than I would think I would use. Dye everything. It's going to look a little bit garish, but then you follow up with a darker pigment stain. It's going to tone everything down. That's going to get into the pores and darken everything, but that bright dye underneath it is going to give it a little bit of pop.
Is the darker pigment stain and still in the red family?
Yes. Yeah. I think we did an article with basic dye stain recipes for various woods. I'm pretty sure we covered mahogany in that. Ben will
Sounds
find
familiar.
it.
Ben
He
will find
finds
it.
everything.
He's writing it down now. He's not happy.
I'm just going to start mentioning articles right and left for Ben to have to go and look up.
Even imaginary
Yeah,
ones.
just imaginary articles.
All right. Well, let's move on to our probably most interesting segment, I would think, maybe. We have on the line with us contributing editor extraordinaire and tool guru, Rollie Johnson. Rollie, I'm here. It's Tom and Matt and Mike Pekovich are here.
Hey, Rollie.
Hi.
Hey,
How are you guys?
Rollie.
Hey. It's snowing.
Is it
What?
really?
No. You guys think it snows 10 months a year here, so I just thought I'd help you out. But,
Appreciate that. That's awesome.
Yeah. It only snows 9 months of the year here, so get it straight. Yes.
Hey, we're part of the reason we're calling you is one of the things that you are taking on for us is a really nifty blog. Talking Tools with, it's called Talking Tools with Rollie Johnson, but I was thinking Roland.
Rollie. It's got to be
Roland?
Rollie.
Isn't it Rollie?
Yeah, Raleigh, yes.
So we can change that, right?
I'll change it.
You can change whatever you'd like.
It's
you
too
know?
formal. But
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
You wrote your first blog that went live a couple weeks ago was about the Radial arm saw. So you were touting its advantages. So you want to
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the best. It's the best saw ever invented. Didn't you know that? It's the only saw you need. You can mold with it. You can plane with it. You can crosscut, rip. You can run a
Route.
lathe off of it.
can it make biscuits?
One of the fun things about picking up that radial arm saw that I got is that it had all the literature, and that thing was built in about 1958, and the literature was probably produced in about 1955. It's really pretty humorous. They've got this really nifty set of plans that you get with it for building a workbench that centers around the radial arm saw. The radial arm saw is built right into the middle of the workbench. So
Awesome.
you can do everything. You got your vices on the end, and you got your pegboard for all of your hanging tools, it was a different era. It was a different world.
Well, here's a question for you. I've been to your shop a couple times, and where are you putting this radial arm saw, my friend?
You missed it. It's been in here. I've had a 10-inch radial arm saw in here for 35 years.
Really?
So you walked right by it a dozen times, and it blends in so well that you didn't even notice it.
Well, you don't notice it because it's got wood offcuts piled
Shut up, Matt.
all
Shut up,
over
Matt.
it because he
Matt,
never
shut up.
uses it.
Easy. We're not talking truth here. No.
Well, the blade is getting rusty. So what are you doing?
Hey, while we have you on the line, we, for the podcast, we take questions from listeners, and we had someone write in, and I thought it might be something that you'd want to chime in on. So, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
So this one comes from Brett. And Brett says, I recently bought my first bandsaw. I got it mainly for resawing. It's a 20-inch saw, and it came with a 1 1/4-inch blade. Is there a blade that is suitable for both resawing and curves? Also, I'll be cutting some cookies soon that are 17 inches in diameter. Could I use a smaller blade for such a tall cut?
Such a tall cut. Sure, you can resaw just about anything in the world with a 1/2-inch or 5/8 inch wide blade. One of the reasons that a wide blade is advantageous is if you have kind of a flexible saw where it's hard to keep the beam strength, a wider blade does a better job of it. But if you've got a good substantial saw that's not going to flex or move around so your guides stay in place, I've resawn a lot of stuff with 1/2-inch and 5/8 inch, and it works just fine. The trick is you just need to have the right number of teeth. 3 teeth per inch for anything that you're doing that is probably taller than 10 inches. You need the big gullets to haul all of the debris out of it. But 1.25 inches you really don't need for much.
Right.
You can do pretty much everything you want with a 1/2-inch blade. And a 1/2-inch blade you can cut down to about a 5-inch diameter circle. So it really becomes pretty useful. A lot of times we're cutting a lot bigger than 5-inch diameter when we're doing nice smooth arcs for jigs and different things like that. So 1/2-inch on a bigger saw is pretty much a standard blade. I've got a 5/8 inch on my saw right now. It's a alternating tooth pattern blade. It's got 3 teeth per inch, followed by 4, followed by 3, all the way around. And is really a good resaw blade because that alternating pattern lessens the vibration of the blade. Because when you have a set pattern all the way around, say 3 teeth per inch, they tend to set up a harmonic vibration because you have that constant drumming of those teeth equally spaced, sets up this harmonic vibration. We see it in flutter on the cut, and the cut is a little bit less than ideal. But if you go to an alternating pattern, because it goes 3 and 4 and 3 and 4, or 2 and 3, some of them are, it breaks up that harmonic, so you don't get nearly as much vibration. You can still get a little flutter, but very little. And all the top resaw blades are like that. The Laguna Resaw King is alternating pattern. Mm-hmm. The Highland Woodworking Wood Slicer is alternating pattern. The Supercut saw blade, the Wood Saver 2, is alternating pattern. Yeah. It makes a big difference. It really does.
Well, as some folks may not know, but Rollie actually wrote a book, or the book, on bandsaws. So
the book, yeah.
He knows from
Absolutely.
Where he's coming
it's
from.
It's the best, man. It's the best. And I'm totally unbiased about that.
So what are you working on these days? Traveling?
Oh, I'm working on my house. That's scary, isn't it? As a matter of fact, I was doing drywall this morning.
Drywall?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah. I'd like to not know about it. But I am building a cat bed for in the shop that's all dovetailed. How's that? Is that nice?
A what?
A what?
a cat bed. I've got my resident
bed?
cat.
Oh, a cat bed.
Cat bed, yes.
He's got to make a new workbench for his Radial arm saw.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, with pegboard. Oh, man, I like pegboard. Have you ever tried to veneer pegboard? It's really cool. You put a veneer on, and you can spend days punching all the little holes back in because you got them all.
Rollie, have you been drinking or smoking anything?
It's the drywall
it would probably help. Though.
I love the pegboard with the crime scene tool outlines on it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Then you got to paint it white. Then you definitely. I suppose you could veneer it with maple. Maybe bird's eye maple, but then you'd get confused with the bird's eye or the holes to put the tool in. So,
no, would you use a backer veneer?
Yeah, you need a backer veneer on pegboard, yes.
This is all good.
Yeah, this is all good stuff. You know, we're probably going to see not only a comeback of the radial arm saw, but a major comeback of pegboard.
Yeah, Home Depot better stock up.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen pictures of shops from back in the 50s where the walls were all pegboard all the way around. Man, you talk about versatility. You could get every little gizmo that you could possibly imagine. And like Mike said, you know, have the outline on all of them so you know where they go and you know who came in and took your tools.
That's right.
At least you know they're missing.
I actually lined my kids' bedrooms with pegboard.
Yeah, I was going to say, why are you putting up drywall? Why aren't you putting up pegboard in your house?
I'd like to live in my house. I don't think my wife would let me in.
Hey, Rollie, we have a segment that we do semi-regularly. It's our all-time favorite.
You guys don't do anything semi-regularly, you know. It never.
Can
never.
I finish?
Oh, excuse me. Yes,
that was my big to do right there. No, we have a segment called All-Time Favorite Technique of All Time for this week, and thought we'd ask you what is yours for this week.
Okay.
He already told us pegboard.
Pegboard, yeah. Pegboard. Pegboard is the answer to everything. You know, it just is. You can make jigs out of it. Favorite technique, of course, it's got to be a tool technique. So here's my question to you guys. How many people out there in radio land like to change knives in the cutter head of their joint? Yeah, see, it's unanimous. I didn't see a single hand go up. So there's a really easy way to make sure that all your knives are set exactly the same, and it requires a stick and a pencil. That's all it requires.
So is it a
about
segmented
as low
cutter
tech
head?
as you can get. What's that?
Is it a segmented cutter head?
Well, no, segmented you don't have to worry about. And insert cutter heads you don't have to worry about where you have a disposable knife. But there's still a lot of us out there who still have joiners that have just the plain old knives and gibs and jack screws, and it can drive you nuts trying to get those knives so that they're all running exactly the same.
Right.
And basically all this stick is, you've got about a 10-inch long stick of hardwood. Hard maple works really well. And you lower your outfeed table just slightly, maybe about 10 thousandths below where it needs to be. And you rotate the cutter head, and you have one knife inserted in the cutter head, snugged up, and you let the knife pick up the board and move it until it drops it. And you'll put a mark on that board at the end of your outfeed table or at the front edge of your outfeed table where you start, and you'll also put a mark where the knife drops the board. That's going to be your distance that you're going to set that knife side to side. You're going to set the other two knives so that it picks up that board and moves it the same exact amount side to side. Once you've got that done, all your knives are set as accurately as you're ever going to get them. Then you simply raise your outfeed table until the knife just brushes the bottom of that board, and you're ready to go. Now, when I set my knives, a lot of times what I like to do is I like to leave the outfeed table just a skosh low so that I get a little bit of snipe in the end of that board when I go through. And then I can raise that table until that snipe just disappears. Now I know that I've got a nice clean cut all the way through the board. It's really pretty simple. There is an article that we did on that a while back.
Ben's going to look that up.
It up. Yeah, and it. I mean, you can literally change out all three knives in the standard cutter head in 20 minutes or less.
Cool.
So it's yeah, and I got to give credit for it. I learned that technique from Tay Freed, one of our progenitors at the magazine. I learned that 30 years ago from him.
Oh, Tay Fred.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
I had no idea what he said.
Tay Freed.
Tay Freed.
You know,
Tay
yeah.
Fred.
Some people say it's Fred, but could be Freed.
Could be Freed.
Fried.
Could be fried.
Which I am. Oh, excuse me.
Hey, we're live. Be careful.
You might be lying, but I'm not certain most days. You know?
Yeah, or Rollie's got to get poked every day to make sure.
Yeah, that's right. Jen just pushes me out of bed in the morning. That way I kind of come to. And I can get,
If you stand up, all is well.
Yes, exactly.
Depending on the sound he makes when he hits the floor, you can tell.
Yeah.
So, Rollie, you're doing the woodworking shows this season again?
Yes, I am.
When does that kick off?
We start in Baltimore on the 7th of January, and we've got 13 cities that we're going to do in 14 weeks.
Wow.
So hopefully I'll see a bunch of you folks out there.
Yeah, either in Jersey or Springfield, I'm sure.
No, he didn't mean us.
Wonderful. Yeah.
He was talking about the people that listen to the podcast.
Us too.
Yeah.
What's more fun than seeing Rollie?
Yeah, well,
How much time do we have?
Everybody at the door knows your faces when you come in, so they have an early warning for me, so I can leave the room.
I see. You tell when we walk in, the people let you know we're coming, and then you run and hide.
That's it.
Sounds good to me.
I'm just here to buy.
Hey, Rollie, do you know what information you're going to cover this year in the woodworking shows?
Yeah, I am. One of my seminars is going to be hand planes for the power tool woodworker.
Cool.
Which is, that's going to be a lot of fun. Another one is finishing. People just love finishing. So I'm doing a seminar on wipe-on finishes, but also on brush-on varnishes. And
Awesome.
how to get the right equipment and how to do a really nice job of brushing on finishes. And then my third seminar is going to be card scrapers and the number 82 scraper. And that's something that I've got a blog coming up on. Number 82 is a really little-known scraper that Stanley produced, and it's probably one of the most useful scrapers you can have in your shop. One of the most useful tools in general.
The number 82 is the one that has a long handle and you pull it towards
Yeah,
you?
it's got a long handle, adjustable head, has a real heavy blade in it that's beveled at 45 degrees, you sharpen it by putting a burr on the flat side of that bevel.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
I'm not going to go
Wait for
it.
Matt has something to say.
That's a paint scraper, isn't it, Rollie?
No, I got to occupy the airwaves. We can't get in here, Matt.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up.
You can't hear me,
What?
Rollie?
Yeah. I didn't split enough kindling for my phone today, so it's a little weak. Yeah.
That's funny. I think you'll have the same problem the next time we discuss payment for one of your articles.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, that's all right. That's why I'm putting up a lot of firewood this winter.
It's gonna be a long winter.
I won't have anything to pay the gas now. So.
Hey, Rollie, thanks for spending a few minutes with us. We'll see you very soon.
Yes, you will. And thanks for the promo on the blog. I'm looking forward to that. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're talking about is taking some of the reader questions that we get, and Ben has cast a net already to, give you some fodder to answer readers and listeners. Hopefully, maybe someday live even.
Do I have to give them honest answers?
No,
but okay. It's your name, not mine.
They have to be believable answers.
Well, I thought maybe we'd turn this into a reality program.
We can do whatever you want, man. As long as naked isn't in the title, we're good.
Or on screen.
Naked on radio just doesn't work. Like I tell people, I have a face that's ideal for radio.
All right, Rollie. Thanks, man. Good luck on the road.
All right.
We'll see you.
See you later, Rollie.
Have a good one. See you guys.
Well, that was cool having Rollie on the show. Folks should definitely check out his blog, Talking Tools with Rollie Johnson, and be good to go. I think it'll be fun, entertaining, and he's already garnered some pretty lively discussion on the Radial arm saw. So check it out.
Always worth a lively conversation.
Let's get back to the questions. This one comes from Michael, and Michael says, I'm making a top for a federal-style tea table, and I'm attaching a raised lip molding. The top will be solid walnut boards glued up into a 30-inch wide panel, and the molding will be a 3/4-inch walnut as well. My initial plan was to create a tongue and groove joint with the groove in the molding, and to miter the molding at the corners. I'm foreseeing major wood movement restrictions doing this, and was curious how you would attach this kind of molding to a top to accommodate movement. Mike had, I thought, really good solution when we talked about this?
No, I think you're on the right track. I'm not, a really avid period furniture maker, so I'm the wrong person to be answering this question with any sense of authority. But basically what you're making is kind of like a frame and panel top. In terms of the top, the solid portion of the top is your panel, and then your little mitered molding is kind of the frame around it. You've got a groove in the molding. You've got a little tab on the top, which is all good. I think you just make sure side to side that your top is a little bit short. And in terms of gluing it, I mean, I don't know, my guess would be you're gluing just in the center portion on the end grained edges. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you glue the miters at the joints. I might even try to maybe find a way to reinforce those. And then I think along the long grain edges, you've got to leave that to float.
It has to be left to float.
Right.
But I would also, 30 inches is really wide.
It's pretty wide.
For a tea table. It's like a tea table for 20, but
It's a lot of tea.
it's a lot of tea. So, I know that it would be tempting to use flats on panels, flats on wood to get, maybe a really interesting lively grain pattern. But I think I would personally go for a quarter sawn or rift sawn.
Okay.
Because that would minimize the amount of expansion and contraction across the width of the board.
Right.
And most of it, it would more expand in its thickness. So you'd be able to even further minimize the potential problem by using the right grain of wood.
That would definitely help.
Yeah.
Or plywood with shops on veneer on it,
Sure.
It's like there's a lot of different solutions you could use too. Or pegboard.
Pegboard. It's every man's solution.
Yeah. That way when you spill the tea, it just runs right through the holes.
There you go.
And you have like a slop bucket
Or
beneath there
a
to catch
slop
it all.
bucket with a little runoff pan.
Yeah. Be
Drains
awesome.
right to the dog dish.
That's right. A spittoon.
There you go. Well, back to the solution about kind of that frame and panel thing.
Back to the reality.
Yeah. The one thing I would do is the tongue that's on the tabletop itself, I wouldn't center that and have a shoulder top and bottom. I would align the tongue with the top of the tabletop. Mm-hmm. And basically what you're doing is you're creating a rabbet along the bottom edge of the top. So basically when it fits into the molding, there is no shoulder there. So as that expands and contracts, you're not going to see a shadow line, from a shoulder that might be there.
Right. And it also looks like what those tables look like, where there's like the molding is. Sometimes I've seen them where the molding is actually carved into a thick piece of wood.
Right.
Yeah. Or where the molding, it almost like it sits on top. So you never see a shoulder on those tables.
Yeah, you never see a joint line or anything.
So, yeah.
Cool. All right, well, it's time for some listener feedback. We'll start with Wayne. And Wayne writes, the beards are getting better as the hair is thinning on top. Looking good.
He's obviously only talking to you two.
Clearly. Maddie,
I can't get any thinner.
Maddie writes, it's like having a few buddies in the shop with me that share my sense of humor. Don't ever change. Don't ever change.
That's a sense of humor.
That's quite a sense of humor. There's some good times happening in that shop.
That's right.
And finally, Scott writes, I'm sitting here with my wife trying to carve out some dates for a show I thought I wanted to attend, and I can't seem to remember what it is. Is there something coming up in the spring in Massachusetts that I might be thinking about? Well, Scott, yes, there is. There is a Santa Claus. Fine Woodworking Live 2017 is happening this April 21st to the 23rd, and it's happening near Sturbridge at the Southbridge Hotel and Conference Center. And we'll have probably close to 20 presenters, a bunch of tool demos, booths, and some other fun stuff. I think probably one of the big highlights is our keynote speaker. It's going to be Hank Gilpin. Mm-hmm. That's a huge coup. So we have one of the legends of woodworking.
How is that a coup? What did we overthrow? We just asked the guy to come do it, and he said yes.
That's a coup. Come on. Don't downplay the work.
It's like we formed a small army, and we invaded Rhode Island.
Well,
and we got Hank Gilpin.
We had to cross the drawbridge. But no, all of our contributing editors will be there. There'll be Chris Gochner, Chris Bexford, Garrett, Steve Latta, Michael Fortune,
Maybe Rollie Johnson.
maybe Raleigh. As long as he brings the pegboard,
Right.
we'll be fine. But we've got a bunch of other people: Andrew Hunter, Michael Cullen, Tim Rousseau. So it's going to be quite a hoot. 3 days of woodworking fun in Massachusetts in April, and if you are interested, check out finewoodworkinglive.com for more information and for registration details. So it's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. And even I should say, I forgot to mention the two guys next to me are going to be key presenters. So
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's that.
I'll be
There's
in
that.
a broom closet somewhere. That'll be where I get to present.
polishing the pegboard.
That's right.
What I'm really happy about this time around is that I'm not presenting every single slot of the show because so many people show up
Mike,
and I never get to see
Mike,
them.
we need to talk after the podcast.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
So I'm looking forward to that. And
Yeah.
even still, what there's like 20 presenters, and there's no way anybody can actually see all of them, but I actually want to
Yeah.
see what everybody's doing.
So
So
your presentation is life as a Instagram and pod god, right?
that's the first one. The second
That's
one
in the big room.
is getting a hand plane up and running, like a brand new hand plane. Okay, I just spent $300 odd bucks on a Lee Nielsen or Veritas or Clifton or something, and it's really good. Okay, what do I do to really start making shavings here? Sounds like an obvious question, but it's kind of a scary thing. It's a big investment, and I want this thing to work really well. How do I go about doing that?
Sounds good.
Yeah. And Matt is going to be talking boxes, right? Box making techniques.
Evidently,
maybe
that's all I can do.
52 times.
Got to talk about boxes. I
And
will be talking about designing boxes.
Oh, cool.
How to make boxes that aren't ugly. I don't know anything about it, but I'll give it a shot.
awesome. Way to play it up. All right. So, folks, remember to check out finewoodworkinglive.com again for information. That's all we have for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in 2 weeks on November 25th for our next episode. Remember to send your questions and comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. And please spread the word about Shop Talk Live to your woodworking friends and neighbors. You can catch the podcast via iTunes, stream it on the web at shoptalklive.com, or catch us on iHeartRadio. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and look for all of us on Instagram as well. Thanks for listening, and have fun in the shop. Do not pound thy biscuits. Who we calling?
My wife to get her biscuit recipe.